Hello, my name is Pastor Kevin Robertson, and welcome to another episode of Grace Track, or I should say, Inside the Grace Track. Now, let me give you a little heads up on this one. Usually, I interview people that have taken the Grace Track to our church and really share their experiences. And so, this is going to be an interesting one because it was this morning that I was on my early morning walk, and I was by myself wearing my mask. And I could not get this guy off my mind because I haven't seen him in years. I talked to him probably months ago, and I was praying about this, and I was thinking, man, his story would be really good at this time. So let me first introduce you. This is Gene Grass. He's a retired pastor, correct?
Correct.
Well, I
Yes.
don't even know if a pastor really retires.
I just don't get paid for what I do.
Yeah, it's just like all this, and so let me. How do I do this? Gene is Peggy Wilkinson's father. Now, if you don't know who Peggy Wilkinson is, she was part of her church, and Paul and Peggy were part of her church. In 2014, Peggy received breast cancer, correct?
Yes.
2014, and we were very optimistic about her healing, and therefore, and then in 2015, I think June or July, that she went to be with the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to do a little introduction to get to know Gene. And really, I think what we're going through now is we're all second guessing what's going on. We're all in this pandemic. If you look at Gene's Facebook, it keeps showing pictures of his new masks. so apparently he's buying all these new masks. And so, Gene, when did you first receive Christ in your life? Because there's definitely a calling in your life to be a pastor. So are they connected together, or were they separate?
Well, it was my dad became a Christian when I was 6 years old.
Okay.
And he for many years, so he would have been 26 years old when he became a Christian. And he waited so long to become a Christian because he worked with people that called themselves Christians, and yet they didn't live the life. And so when Dad became a Christian, he changed. There was a definite change in behavior, things he did. And so at age 6 years old, I began to go to church.
Uh-huh.
And so I think I first received the Lord at a youth camp. And I was probably, an early teen at that time.
That says a lot about who you are. Because I'll be honest with you, Gene, you are one of the most authentic pastors I've ever met in my life. You really are. And you don't put a facade on. And it just made complete sense now. It was like that missing piece. Because very few people are like you, that are very authentic with their walk with the Lord, and they're really real in who they are. It came from your dad. It came from your dad. Because it's interesting how your dad was seeing all these hypocrites and decided to, I can't be that. Anyone can be a hypocrite. But you just shared how authentically you changed. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm very fascinated with that. Because you're a prime example of your dad then.
I appreciate Dad's decision to become a Christian and to live a changed life.
Oh, absolutely. So when did you get a call to the ministry?
Well, I never really wanted to be a pastor. It's one of those things that I love the Lord and I wanted to serve him, but I wanted to do that as a school teacher.
Really?
And so I went to Seattle Pacific University, and in 1968, I graduated with a degree in mathematics. And then I went back to school to get my teaching certificate so I could teach math and physics in high school, as I felt that was really the calling that God had put in my life. And it was, and then I was drafted into the service right after I finished my student teaching. So I spent 2 years as, and in the Army, I learned how to become a medic, and then they gave me psychiatric training. And so my job in the Army was to work on the psychiatric ward.
Wow.
And so I had to deal with a lot of different patients, a lot of people that I was in Japan, so we were the halfway point between Vietnam and the States.
Okay.
And so we would get patients from Vietnam, and then decisions would be made to either send them back to Nam or send them to the States. So we were just kind of a 2 weeks to a month holding place for these patients. And but it was great training. I learned so much through that program. And when I got out, I taught high school mathematics, and then I was a part-time youth pastor. After 2 years, the youth group had grown to the point where the church offered me a full-time position. And it was at a Free Methodist church up in Seattle area.
Well, that's fascinating, because I had the same beginning. They gave me the youth because nobody else would do the youth. and the youth group grew, and they offered me a part-time first. And then, but one thing about you being a youth pastor, you had this fascination about magic and juggling.
Oh, yes.
Now, let me show this picture. This is from 1967, I think, or 68. And I was going, this guy is, I mean, talking about the perfect youth pastor that can keep kids' attentions all the time. Where did this fascination started with you?
Well, when I was in high school, I was taking physics from my teacher. And one day I was just kind of daydreaming out the window, and he was up in front starting to lecture, but then he grabbed an apple and an orange and a pear, and he started juggling them.
Oh, really?
And he got my attention. And I thought, oh my goodness, what's he doing? And that so fascinated me that I went home that night and I found 3 golf balls at home. And I practiced until I could juggle 3 balls.
Oh, so you're self-taught?
Yes. And then when I got to college, so I really didn't do much with it. I just juggled 3 balls. But when I got to college, between my, I went to a community college my first 2 years, and then I transferred to Seattle Pacific. Well, that summer between the community college and Seattle Pacific, I met a guy who rode unicycles. And he rode unicycles on a high wire. And it was at a camp. And so I started talking to him and I said, man, how do you ride this unicycle? I've only seen monkeys in a circus ride those things before. And he said, well, this is what you do. And he said, you want to borrow my unicycle? And I said, sure. So I borrowed it, took it home, and learned how to juggle or learn how to ride the unicycle. So now I could juggle 3 balls and ride the unicycle. And he said, you know, we ought to make some money to get through college. And I said, sure, what do we need to do? He said, you need to become a better juggler. And also you need to learn how to ride the unicycle on a high wire. And so I began to start juggling pins.
This was at some kind of parade, I'm assuming.
That was a parade there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because basically I can't walk and chew gum, let alone ride a unicycle and juggle. What are those 3 juggle things or whatever they're called?
So anyway, so for 2 years at college, well, actually it was just a year. He dropped out of school at the end of the junior year, but I worked with him, and we started out just having a 7-foot high wire.
Right.
So 7 feet off the ground. It was portable. We could do high school assemblies, et cetera, et cetera. And one day he said, you know, I'm going to build the world's tallest unicycle. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, what do you have to do? And he said, well, so far, 15-foot unicycle, he says he found somebody in Russia that had ridden a 15-foot. He said, I'm going to build a 20-foot unicycle. And so he built a 20-foot unicycle. And just before he wrote it for the first time, the Seattle Times called Seattle Pacific and said, you got any weird things happening at your school that we could do a pictorial section on?
Right.
And they said, yeah, we've got these unicycle riders and these guys that juggle. And so they came to campus, and 15 minutes before they got there, my friend had finished building the 20-foot unicycle the night before. Right. And he got on it for the first time 15 minutes before and rode it around the parking lot before they got there. And so once they got there, they didn't know he had just built it.
Right.
And so he was riding it around. And of course we were doing the high wire. I was on he was riding a unicycle across the high wire. I was on his shoulders juggling as we went across the high wire.
Right.
And so our pictures went all the way across the nation. and I've Got a Secret picked it up. And so they asked us to be on the program.
Oh, really?
And his secret was he rode the world's tallest unicycle. My secret was I rode on the shoulders of the guy who rode the tallest unicycle.
You were on his shoulders?
I did.
That's trust.
But the funny thing is, when we were doing the program, we did it in the preview, and they were so scared when they saw me up there on the shoulders, juggling on his shoulders on the 20-foot unicycle. They said, we can't do this. Well, so they put this thing around me with wire, and after we practiced that, they said, oh, we can't do this either. We're just going to let you lift up the unicycle. So I never did get to ride on his shoulders up there on the program.
Okay.
So I was on the program, but I was lifting up the unicycle to him.
They were too nervous.
Yeah.
And so you became a youth pastor full time. So what year was that when you became a youth pastor?
I became a youth pastor, when I got out of the service, that would have been in 1971.
Okay.
I was discharged from the service.
Okay. And so you've always ministered in Oregon?
Okay. I started out in Washington. Seattle area, Burien, Washington.
Okay. And so I'm assuming you met your wife in college like they usually do?
Actually, no. Actually,
no, sorry.
What happened was that I was, let's see, it would have been when I finished my student teaching, which would have been in 1969. Okay. I was working with the youth in the Pacific Northwest Conference. Okay. And so I was going to go to Winona Lake, Indiana, right, to be at the general conference for youth. Right. And my wife was from Saskatchewan, Canada. And so she was going to be a representative from Saskatchewan. And so we met in Indiana at that conference. Right. And when I got her address as I was leaving and coming back, mm-hmm, and that I was drafted into the service. And so I was in basic training, and I called my mom and said, there's an address of this girl in my dresser. If you find it, send it to me. If you don't worry about it. Right. And so she sent it to me, and we communicated, wrote letters for 2 years.
Wow. And
then I got out of the service, and we met each other in Seattle for 1 week, and I asked her to marry me. So I had only seen her for 2 weeks out of my life before I asked her to marry me.
That's almost like online dating with
I know
letters.
Yeah.
You don't meet the person till and you guys knew each other. And this is way, way before any video conferencing or anything like that. You're talking about actual physical letters.
And sometimes, like, I'd write at the last year I was in the service, we wrote every day to each other. Right. So, but sometimes they would pile up. So you get like 6 letters in a row, all the same day.
Right. So when did you first become a senior pastor?
That, when I went to seminary, so after 2 years of 2 years of teaching and youth pastor part-time, and then a year full-time youth pastoring, I decided that I probably should go to seminary. Okay. And so I moved to Oregon to go to what was called at that time Western Evangelical Seminary. Now it's George Fox Seminary. Okay. And and the church the Free Methodist Church in Salem hired me to be the youth pastor there part-time while I was going to seminary.
Right. Okay. And so from 1969 or 1971, when you were hired full-time, to what year did you retire or stop getting paid?
Let's see. So then I came to Beaverton and was a senior pastor then. So 5 years in Salem while I was going to seminary, and then took the church as a senior pastor. And I stayed at Beaverton for my whole career. And so I was there for 36 years.
Now, very seldom you hear stories of pastors that have been there that long, because I think I've been at my church for 21, 22 years. Uh-huh. You never hear that, let alone 35 years. I may catch up with it. No, I won't. No, I won't, because I retired at 67. That's 9 years from now. Nope, I won't catch up. I'll be 30 years. Maybe I'll just stay till 73.
Yeah.
And do it that way.
You can do it.
Yeah, don't give up. So I want to show you. So what year did you retire? 2014, 2000?
Oh man, I've kind of forgotten. It's probably somewhere around there.
Okay, so this picture is in front of your church, around close to your retirement. Can you kind of tell me who is who in this picture?
So to the right of the picture, my 2 sons, my oldest son kneeling there, and my youngest son is in back of him. And then all the way to the left is Peggy.
Okay. And then grandchildren. And you probably have more grandchildren, because this picture was 2014.
Yes.
I think so. So anyway, to me, I look at this picture and I go, Gene has the perfect life. I mean, You're right in front of your church. You got this beautiful family that it looks like everyone's smiling, everyone's happy, and you're there with your wife. You've been married. You're married forever, since in the early 1970s. And so I look at this and I go, this guy has had an incredible life. Now, this is where sometimes life is just not fair, because 2014, 2 years later after that picture was taken, Peggy was diagnosed with cancer. Do you remember when you first heard about it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, did you go, like last Sunday, I just preached on worst case scenarios and how I have tendency to go to worst case scenario. And every time I go to worst case scenario, the joy is gone. It's just totally gone. And then I try to take control over the issues. And I have major control issues, and I think they're based on fear. And this is why we have this. And so Peggy is your youngest daughter, correct?
She's she's my only daughter.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. So did you go to worst case scenario then, or were you
You know,
just,
I think that it was kind of numb. Um, I know I thought about all the people that survived breast cancer. So I don't think at that time that I thought in terms of her um, ever coming to the place where she might pass away from the cancer. I always just, at the beginning there, I just felt she would beat it.
yeah, I think I did too. And we were very optimistic. And I mean, we had a Sunday morning service where we had a hair cutting ceremony, and
Yeah.
we cut, I didn't, we had two barbers, and we cut Paul's hair and Peggy's hair. And Jennifer, my wife, says, I want to get my hair cut to support her. And I went, no, we can support her any other way. But, but it was a very optimistic, very upbeat service. And we were singing songs, you can beat this and all this stuff. But, and we were there when she had her first surgery, and we were all in the waiting room and stuff. Very optimistic. So do you remember when you started going, okay, this is not looking good now. You know, this is, you know, because I was reading her blog this morning, and her Facebook is still up there. And I noticed some reports that you were giving about blood counts and all that stuff, kind of reliving what we lived in 2014. When did you start thinking, okay, this is serious?
Well, you know, I think as time went on that I realized, oh, you know, I think we were really optimistic when she had gotten through chemo and she had gotten through the radiation and but then when it had metastasized to her brain, I think that's when it really started to, I really realized, because they've started out just saying it's stage 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden we're at stage 4. And
Oh, so it just skipped a whole stage.
that kind of what I remember, but I'm not real sure the progression there.
Yeah.
But for me, it skipped a whole stage. And we just went from being something that was manageable and into something that was, it seemed out of control. And then finding out that she had basically two cancers, one that was very aggressive and one not so aggressive, and realizing that the aggressive one was the one that was doing the most damage.
Right. Now, the thing is, I only can imagine as a parent, because I don't have any children, and I think there's a good reason I don't have any children, because if I had a daughter, I don't know how I could deal with anything, because, you know, you remember Peggy as a, you know, as a child, when if she fell down and she cried, you would comfort her, you would grab her, you would do things, you would teach her how to ride, you know, unicycles and juggle, which I've seen her do it. You know, she did it excellent. But just this is out of your control now. You can't be the father of this little child anymore. And so I was kind of curious, your prayer life, how did it change? Was the peace gone? I mean, you're going to worst case scenario, I assume now, or were you very hopeful that she would be healed?
You know, I think there was still hope there, but I know inside of me it was getting less and less of the hope. But being there for her, and I just, I think my prayer over the years is I drew, experience in life and being a pastor and helping people through rough times of life, I think that one of the things that changed in my prayer life was realizing that I needed to connect to God, because prayer request, letting him know how I felt and letting him know that I would love to see her healed. Of course, I did pray that way.
Right.
But at the same time, I realized that it was out of my control. It was really in God's hands. And I think that, there's that piece of you that wonders, is God going to do this right?
Right.
When is he going to come through with this miracle?
Yeah.
And so I knew that I needed to draw close to God, that I needed to be there. And then I needed to say, Lord, I just want to be in connection with where you're going with this. I think, what was it? It was about a month and a half before she passed away, that my wife had gone there to be with the family and help out. And I was going to come. It was going to be another week before I came. And I remember being in the shower and I just talking to the Lord and saying, God, I don't, this is just so hard for me. I really want you to heal her. And it's really hard for me to pray, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. Because I really want my will. I really want what I want. And if your will is to let her go, I really don't want that. And I remember also 25 years before that, Charles Swindoll had written in his book this one called "A Pearl of Great Price." It was a parable. And in that pearl of great price, it was this God talking to this person wanting to draw close to God. And he sees this pearl and he says, how much is this? And God says, well, what do you have? And he starts talking about, well, I have a house. And God says, well, I'll take that. And then he says, what else do you have? And he says, well, I have, and he just kept on going through this list. I've got $10 in my wallet. And he says, I'll take that. And then as he gets down to, God said, what else? And he says, well, that's it. You've got it all now. And he says, well, what about your family? And the person wanting the pearl of great price said, okay, I give you my family. And I remember reading that at that time, and I struggled for weeks as a young pastor saying, I don't know if I want to give you my family, because if I give you my family, you might take them. And I don't know. But I remember at the end of those 2 weeks of struggling, I finally came to the place and said, okay, God, I give you my kids and I give you my wife. And as I was in that shower, God reminded me of 25 years before. And basically, it was like, I didn't hear a voice, but it's like the impression saying, are you still with me?
See, Gene, this is crazy because look, this is where you're so much more spiritually mature than I am, because I would be having a different conversation in the shower. I really would. I would go, I didn't say anything 25 years ago. I didn't mean it 25 years ago, because there's something about your walk with Jesus that fascinates me, because there's such a surrender in that moment, that in that shower weeks prior to her death, that you had to know she's not going to be healed after that shower.
I had that impression. you have to realize that in that shower, I just had tears just flowing out of my eyes.
Right. Okay. Because I remember you and I went for these walks,
Yes.
and you told me a story. And I still remember you just nonchalantly telling me the story of walking around the hospital. And I was behind you going, I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't understand. And the thing is, to me, I view myself as God's PR person. And I go, look, personal relationships here. If you heal her, this is going to look good for you, and stuff like that. So I'm negotiating all kinds of stuff going, because we have a whole church that is excited and lifting her up in prayer. It's going out. And the thing is about Peggy, in the midst of all of this, and maybe you can tell us this, she decided to take the step, but to choose joy. Explain what happened there on the choose joy thing.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, I think she read a book about choosing joy and having a joy jar.
Right.
And so she began to really focus on that. And she had a joy jar in her house. And every day her goal was to come up with 3 joys.
Okay. 3 joys.
Yes.
And then she would put it in the jar.
Yes.
Okay, to do it. And it's saying, it reminds me of Romans being transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so it caused her to think, even in the suffering, even in this battle of cancer, both cancers I'm going through, I can find 3 things today to find joy. And it was little things, I remember.
Yes.
Of her son, or this, or a conversation. And I noticed that a lot of it was when she went to a play with her mom. I think the play was Wicked.
Yes.
And that she was so excited, and that was one of her joys, because it was good to have her mom there. So it's just little things like that were so powerful. And I know to this day, so we're 5 years later after she passed, Jennifer has put this new picture up in her den that says choose joy, because we saw it at a store, and Peggy, we thought, okay, we need to continue to choose joy. So she passed in 2015, correct? I think 2015.
Something like that.
So it's 5 years later. I don't get to see you every week like I did last time. And, Paul got married a few years ago and moved down to San Diego. So I don't get to see you once in a while anymore. No, I shouldn't say anymore. I'm seeing you now.
Right.
After Peggy passed, you're the only pastor that I know that's like me that likes to do early morning walks. So I would come over there 4:35 in the morning, and we would go for walks. And to hear you process some of the things that were going on was, how did you prevent getting bitter? How did you prevent, or did you? Because somehow watching you and listening to you, you always kept that relationship with God very clear and very pure. And did you want to stop talking to him? How did you deal with that?
That's a good question. I think there was many stages that I went through. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling God he made a mistake, mm-hmm. that he should have did a miracle and let Peggy live. Right. There were so many people who needed her, and she blessed so many people and was a joy. And so I remember sharing those things, but at the same time in my mind, I'm knowing that there's a difference between my emotions and truth.
Oh, you're going deep. Okay.
Yeah, I know. But you've got to separate that out, because if I believed all of my emotions at that time, then I would be devastated in my faith. And
That's such a deep statement.
so here, I'll give you an example. When I was a pastor, I was going through the book of Acts, and I came to chapter 12 of Acts. And I was so upset at God on chapter 12 of Acts. I don't know if you remember what's there, but it's James gets 2 verses on his being beheaded. He was put in prison and then he was beheaded. And then Peter gets this whole big long section of an angel coming and rescuing him. And I thought, this does not make sense.
Right.
How can he just let James be beheaded and then he brings an angel to Peter? But the end result was I realized that I don't understand God. I don't understand how he makes decisions. He makes decisions at a very higher plane than I do. And so how does he choose one person, or I shouldn't say choose, how does he allow one person to die and then he gives an angel to another person?
Right. A miracle.
Yeah. And why didn't he do a miracle with Peggy? And so here's the disconnect. So as a pastor, I felt I worked it through in my head and came to some good, solid conclusions. But when Peggy died, my heart was so in shambles and so broken and so hurt. I had this tension between what I knew to be true and my emotions that was just raw and hurt and didn't know what to do. And so one of the things I had learned was that there was this organization called Grief Share that was Christian based, and that I needed somebody to help me through this time. When my dad died, I did great with that. When my brother died, it was fine. And other people in the family had died, I made it through. But when my daughter died, it was so different.
Right.
And so I started Grief Share when I was just 2 weeks after she died. I just wanted to hear. And when I went to Grief Share, it's a 13 weeks, and I got in the middle of this one. And I remember being mad at God. Every once in a while, they would say things or bring up a scripture, and I really didn't want to hear the scripture. I didn't want to hear what it had to say. But they kept on saying, if you've just lost somebody, your emotions are raw, and allow your emotions to be raw. Don't try to fight them. Allow them to come to the surface, express them, talk about them. And it's okay to be angry with God. I was angry at God for taking Peggy. I was angry at her doctor because I felt that he didn't do enough. And I was angry. This sounds terrible, but I was angry at Peggy for not going in sooner. How terrible is that? But I was just angry.
That's normal. I hear that all the time. I'm mad at the one that passed away because they gave up too early. I hear that a lot. But no, it's so where are you now? Now, this is one of the dumbest statements I've heard. Time heals all wounds.
Yeah, it's
Does it get any easier?
let's say it yes, in a certain sense it gets easier, but in another sense, I mean, did this. There's this kind of a park, a wooded area that's about a half a mile from our house.
Uh-huh.
And there, you can walk through the woods. There's a stream that goes down there. And we had a plaque made to put on one of the benches by that stream that talks about Peggy,
Right.
and kind of a memorial place.
Mm.
And like these last month, I've probably walked by that bench, probably at least over 20 times. And every time we go by, I talk to her. Mm. And sometimes I'll sit on the bench and talk to her because I still miss her. You know, it still hurts. But at the same time, I've gotten to the place where I can function in my daily life. I can, you know, when it first happened, all I could think about was that last week of her life. I couldn't think about anything that was positive in her life. It was just always going back to that last week, that last moment when she died. And it was, man, it must have been like a year before I could even start thinking about all the great things, like her when she was younger, playing the piano and you know, all the great things, memories. And so I was able to begin to have good memories after that. And then what I did with Grief Share was I went through in Carlsbad there, probably about 5 of the sessions of Grief Share. So when I came back to Oregon, I found a place where I could go through all 13 weeks. And then I decided that I needed to start doing a 13-week Grief Share at our church. So I've done that for the last 3 years. And every time I go through the Grief Share process, I grow more, I learn more, I understand more. My emotions have now caught up to my theology. It's caught up with what I believe is true. You know, that I don't have that fight inside. I still don't understand why God allowed her to die. I still don't understand that, but I'm not going to until I get to heaven. I don't think he's going to send a letter down to me and say, here it is, what you've been waiting for. Here, the 9 reasons why I allowed her to die.
And
I don't know.
Answers don't comfort.
Pardon?
Giving answers does not comfort.
No. There are no answers.
No. There's no way God is going to go, hey, this is why. And you go, oh, wow, I felt a lot better. I get it now. You know, it's not, because an answer would produce 20 more questions. And so the last question I want to ask you, considering from going back in the beginning of the conversation from 1968, juggling, going and studying psychology and being drafted and meeting your wife, being in the ministry, pastored for 35 years, having this incredible ministry, retiring, losing Peggy, which was horrible, that has to change your perspective on just life itself. And so we're all in this pandemic thing. We're all stuck at home and we're all kind of living in like, what's going to happen? Am I going to get it? And stuff like this. Based on your experiences in life and how you see things, how does somebody experience the peace of Christ in the midst of the unknown? Or can they?
You know, I think that, again, I think a good foundation is having a good theology. And I think every Christian needs to have a theology of death. Because if they don't have a theology of death, it's going to catch them somewhere along the line. They're going to have a loved one die that died too soon.
Okay. Ooh, good night. Okay.
And so we all need a theology of death.
But not, we don't even want to talk about it.
Oh no, we don't.
We don't want to.
And then we don't want, like the pearl of great price, the parable. We don't want to give our loved ones to God
No,
because
no,
He might take them.
no, no, that's crazy. And, you know, I totally agree. But you know what? That is such a deep, profound truth, what you said. Everyone needs to accept a theology of death, right?
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I'm to the place now, like with Peggy's death, that when things happen, like the coronavirus,
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, Lord, if you take me on this one, I get to see Peggy.
Yeah.
You know, I think about, I get to see Peggy sooner. And, but a peace comes from having that relationship with God. I've come to the place when bad things happen that I say, most of the time, I don't ask the Lord to take it away from me. Because the Bible says, in this world, you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So what I tend to say now is, hey, Jesus, here we have another one. Come along with me. Let's walk together. Let's show me what to do. Show me how to react. Show me what my responses need to be. Show me people along the way. Help me to see what you're doing along the way with this, because this is occurring and it's out of control. It's not in my control. Right. And so come with me. And in that I can have peace.
Thank you so much, Gene. I love you to death. And so I hope you guys appreciate this podcast with Gene. We kind of took a U-turn, and like I said, this morning I called Gene and I go, I really felt the Lord say to me, and I didn't manipulate Gene and say, the Lord told me. But within the phone call and within 3 hours later, we did this interview. It was deep, it was powerful and good, and thank you. So thank you for watching and listening to our podcast. If you know anybody that's gone through some deep grief or struggling, I would encourage you guys to share this with them. God bless you. You have a great week.